Welcome to Faith is the podcast. When we think about Jesus' gift of salvation, it's like this radical act of love and service, right? And it got me thinking about how that same spirit can totally transform our relationships too.
Oh, absolutely. It's like that selfless love is a blueprint. And today, we're diving into some really cool ideas about relationships from Kingsley Okonkwo's YouTube video, Marriage Not Built This Way Will Eventually Fail.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting is that he kicks things off by talking about how people all over, like he mentions Canada, the US, the UK, even Australia, are feeling like divorce rates are just way too high.
Right. But what I love is that he doesn't just stop there. He digs deeper and points to what he calls a revelation issue.
A revelation issue. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Basically, he suggests that when we try to build our understanding of marriage on systems that we as humans have created, instead of grounding it in a God-centered understanding, well, things can get kind of messy.
I see. So it's like we're missing that crucial foundation.
Exactly. And he goes on to outline three different models of marriage:
Right.
cultural, contemporary, and then what he calls kingdom marriage.
So cultural marriage, contemporary marriage, and kingdom marriage. Got it.
And he observes that cultural marriage often tends to, favor men, whereas contemporary marriage often swings the other way and leans towards favoring women.
Okay, so it's like these two kind of opposing extremes in a way.
Yeah. And he even gives examples of how in cultural models, women might often feel dissatisfied or unheard. And then in contemporary setups, it might be the men who feel like they're not really benefiting as much. It's like this power dynamic that can create imbalance.
So then where does kingdom marriage fit into all of this?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Okonkwo presents kingdom marriage as this whole new paradigm, one that's not about trying to balance power between genders, but about prioritizing a shared purpose that's rooted in faith.
Mhm.
It's like stepping outside of those societal norms and individual preferences.
Okay, so less about me versus you and more about us together.
Absolutely. And a key part of that is this shift from dependence, which you might see in those cultural marriages where one partner is reliant on the other, and independence, which is often emphasized in contemporary marriages where self-sufficiency is key, towards interdependence.
Interdependence, that's a powerful word.
Right. And he even brings in scripture to highlight this, referencing 1 Corinthians 11:11. It says, "In the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman."
So it's like this beautiful interconnectedness.
Yeah, and what's really insightful is how he uses that verse to say that the standard for our relationships shouldn't just be like the latest trends or even modern ideas of equality. It goes deeper than that. It's about those foundational principles that we find in a relationship with God.
Right, it's like aligning ourselves with a higher purpose.
And building on that, he even talks about how those traditional ideas of men being the sole providers, while maybe they started with good intentions, don't always line up with scripture or even the reality of a lot of modern relationships.
Makes sense. So how does he address the whole idea of financial provision then?
Well, he dives into 1 Timothy 5, which is that passage often used to talk about, financial responsibility.
Hmm.
But he argues that if you look at the whole context, it's actually talking about the responsibility of family members, regardless of gender, to care for widows so that the church isn't overwhelmed.
So it's a broader picture than just saying the husband has to provide.
Exactly. He even suggests that holding on to this rigid provider identity can be harmful. It can lead to feelings of inadequacy for men, especially in situations where their partners are the ones who are financially successful.
Which happens more and more these days.
For sure. And it makes me think about the Proverbs 31 woman. She was clearly a go-getter, entrepreneurial, dynamic, not just staying at home. It challenges those limited views of what biblical womanhood is all about.
It definitely expands the picture. So how does this all tie back to kingdom marriage then?
Well, it sets the stage for his concept of unity, moving beyond those old ideas of male superiority and even the more recent focus solely on equality.
So not just equal footing, but something deeper.
Right, a deeper unity where a shared purpose, that faith-based purpose, is the driving force. He uses this great analogy. If their mission together requires one partner to focus on, say, childcare or household stuff for a while, that's the priority, regardless of who traditionally might have done it.
It's about putting the mission first, whatever that looks like.
And that leads to a super interesting point he makes about submission. It's not about one person submitting to the other's ego or their personal preferences. It's about both partners being under mission, both aligned with their shared God-centered purpose.
Okay, I'm getting this. So it's less about control and more about shared surrender to something bigger than themselves.
You got it. And he's pretty critical of how cultural interpretations of submission have often emphasized male control and authority. And then he tackles headship, too, explaining that in a kingdom marriage, it's not about wielding power, but about leading through service,
Yeah.
just like Jesus did.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is, right. And he contrasts worldly leadership, which is all about dominating others, with how Jesus served others, even washing his disciples' feet. It's like a total paradigm shift in how we think about masculinity and leadership in marriage.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
And he even touches on how different cultural wedding traditions, like kneeling, can be reframed in a kingdom marriage as both partners kneeling before God together.
I love that visual. So it's really about shifting the focus back to the core of the relationship, not external expectations or gender roles, but that mutual commitment to a higher calling and serving each other within that context.
Yes. And he wraps things up by emphasizing that a kingdom marriage is a partnership of two individuals deeply rooted in their faith, united by godly principles to achieve godly purposes together. It's that shared faith and that submission to God that becomes the bedrock of how they interact and support each other.
So it's not just about being a good wife or a good husband. It's about being good together for God.
Love that.
So to recap, the big takeaway here is this idea of a kingdom marriage. It's not defined by those old cultural norms or even just aiming for equality. It's about building on shared purpose, genuine interdependence, and actively serving one another.
And think about what it might look like to, move beyond those traditional roles and embrace this model of unity. A model centered on a bigger mission where both partners bring their strengths to the table and wholeheartedly support each other.
It's a beautiful vision. And I want to ask you, our listeners, what aspects of your own understanding of relationships resonate with this idea of shared purpose and mutual service? And how might this perspective shift how you see the dynamics in the relationships around you? It's something to really ponder.
And before we wrap up, we want to express our sincere gratitude to Business Referred for sponsoring Faith is the Podcast. If you're interested in local business advertising, reach out to them at info@businessreferred.com.
Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into Kingsley Okonkwo's insights here on Faith is the Podcast.